Hello. Welcome to the BBA's Big Bites session on the rise and adoption of DePIN technology. We appreciate your participating today. The BBA's vision is to promote the adoption and growth of blockchain technology by connecting innovators, thought leaders, institutions, and market leaders together through education, networking, and collaboration. All of the BBA events, in person and virtual, are in thanks to our incredible sponsors. They include here the Mass Tech Collaborative, Aon, thank you, Jim, FCAT, Fidelity Digital Assets, Fidelity, Ripple, our silver members, Algorand, Amber Data, Coinbase, KPMG, Ropes and Gray, and Stand with Crypto. Our business partners include Block Health, the Crypto Recruiters, thanks Trevor, Israel David LLC, Keybridge Advisors, Media Shower, Solana, and our startup partners include Developed Medicines, FYEO, Influx, Cadena, True Tickets, and community partners include Boston University's Questrom School of Business, Digital Business Institute, the Federal Reserve, FinTech Women, Niche, Suffolk University, and Tab Group. Quickly on the note of Tab Group, we do have an institutional event every year with Tab Group coming up December 2nd. So please take a look at the registration for that on the BBA website or on our LinkedIn page. We would love to have you. And finally, how do you get involved besides attending our events? We would love to have you as a corporate member, an individual member, or serve as a volunteer and help us out at these events, join one of our wonderful committees. We really appreciate the participation and collaboration. Thanks so much. And with that, I'll let Jim take it away.
Karen, thank you very much. Great to see everyone today. Great to have everyone participating. Jim Knox, proud member of the board of the Boston Blockchain Association. I also co-chair the events committee with Karen Knox. We share the last name. Do not believe we're related. We're still looking. It's been ongoing now for quite a while, but we don't think we're related. Also with Aon Insurance Managing Director, I help head up our digital asset and blockchain practice. Really, really excited today to introduce you to, frankly, I think the leading personnel in the DePIN space. Start off with Sarah Aberg. Sarah is the Chief Legal Officer at Helium Labs. We have Alex Rawitz, who's co-founder of Demo. We have Scott Bork, founder of Orbital Beam. I want to thank you all very much, panelists, for joining. Really, really delighted to have you join us today. So DePIN, what is DePIN? Maybe I'll start off, Sarah, with yourself. Maybe could you just give us a brief overview? What is DePIN? What is this technology all about? What is it?
Sure. So DePIN is an acronym for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. For example, Helium, which was one of the first DePINs, is a decentralized wireless network. It started with wireless access points serving Internet of Things devices. It's now our biggest network is the mobile network. And so these are like Wi-Fi access points. The difference between a central deployment and the decentralized deployment is that Helium does not own any of that infrastructure. That infrastructure is all owned by the individuals who are deploying it. The incentive for them to deploy it is that they earn our native token, which is called HNT, in exchange for the services they're providing to that network. That can include, that's measured based on different factors. It's going to be specific to any product. For us, it is the strength of the coverage, the area that they're located, the amount of data that they transfer, and the quality of the device that they're operating. Other DePINs are going to have similar factors for how they incentivize and reward participants. There's also potentially rewards for utilizing the network, being a service provider, offering services on that network. So for example, at Helium, we have the Helium mobile carrier, which utilizes the Helium network in order to offer mobile phone plans to subscribers.
Sarah, thanks for that. So you mentioned other types of DPINs. Alex, could you just give us a brief, say, overview of Demo? Does it operate a similar way like Helium? Are there different factors? How does that operate, Demo?
There are certainly some similarities. Helium was one of the projects that really inspired us to create Demo about 4.5 years ago. And it was using and setting up Helium nodes that really got us thinking about how would we take some of these principles and apply them into the auto industry specifically. I think that if you are somebody who is inspired and interested in the decentralized aspect of blockchain technology around financial services, then it makes sense to think about how would that apply to other industries. So what we have done in the auto space is we really look at cars as a vehicles in general as an infrastructure asset that can be monetized and really networked in the form of a connected vehicle platform. There's about 300 million cars in the US alone. The average modern car is effectively a data center on wheels. And how you utilize that compute and how you utilize the data that's coming off the car is something that, without a more open network, is historically stuck in silos at the car manufacturers, at insurance companies, at dealership groups, et cetera. And so what we've done is built this network that allows really anyone to connect a car. And through that, we have an open source platform where vehicles as a developer platform can exist. This sort of model of how do we look at assets that exist in the physical world and make them more accessible through software or network them better through software is something that we're seeing applied into the energy sector. We're seeing it applied, of course, in mobility, us being in automotive specifically, and in a whole host of other areas where machines and robots are actively being deployed.
Alex, thanks for that. Sarah, you mentioned before some of the kind of the origins of DePIN. Scott, you and I talked earlier today, and you were mentioning also the origins, beginnings of DePIN. You mentioned Masari. Do you want to explain that for a second?
Oh yeah, Alex was around, and I'm sure Sarah was too. So back in the day, it was called Tippin, uh, and there wasn't anything wrong with the name. Just people wanted a different name instead of Tippin. So all the OGs we used to call it Tippin. And Masari was writing their first DPIN report. I think it was maybe almost 2 years ago now, and they made a funny poll saying, the community doesn't really like the word Tippin. What should we switch it to? And so a random poll actually had DPIN as one of the votes, got the most votes and got put in the report. And we've been riding the DPIN acronym ever since. So yeah, pretty funny origin story.
I
Kind of
think
came out of nowhere.
I think it was also kind of people looking for they were looking for like some standardization. We had DeFi at the time, and I think DeSci and like a few other like D acronyms. And so yeah, people wanted to kind of bring everything closer together under the crypto umbrella.
So, we talked about high level, like what is DePIN, right? You have the blockchain interacting with infrastructure, physical infrastructure in various industries. So I don't want to get too much deep into the weeds today, technically, but how does DePIN work? You have tokenization, smart contracts, distributed network. Can one of you explain to us? It doesn't have to be terribly deep in the weeds, but how does it work, DePIN?
I think that's kind of a tough question to answer because like the under like pinnings of something like Helium and something like Demo are quite different. But I can talk a little bit about like some of the common themes that you see in DePIN.
That'd be
Uh,
great.
One of the most common sort of like elements with almost any DePIN network or network of networks is machine identity. And I think this comes from a world, a position that like as robotics, AI, autonomous vehicles, as these types of technologies become more and more prevalent, we're going to be surrounded by, we already are surrounded in some sense by IoT devices. As these devices get more and more important, we want them to be able to interact. And so you need some system of record for machine identity in terms of how these machines are going to talk to each other and how you really have a record of them. And that, of course, is something that blockchain is really, really well suited to do. You also are going to probably have some system of like consumption validation. Um, and whether it's how much data is somebody using, or either because they're sending data on a network or they're actually consuming data over an API, there's going to be some sort of on-chain system of record of how these things are being managed. I think those are some of the like really, really important key elements of any DePIN network. But the networks that have, that most people are familiar with are taking really, really different approaches to, what are the specifics in their world. Something like proof of coverage in the helium world doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the automotive world.
Sarah, Scott, any follow-up on that?
Yeah, no, Alex hit it right on the head. And, just to try to take all these different sectors and kind of group them is a little tough, but I break it down in a couple buckets for mechanics. So like you got the hardware layer. So like community run hotspots, you got sensors, storage nodes, etc. And then each one of those nodes is like what Alex says, proves it's doing the useful work, whether that's coverage, energy delivered, data quality. The next layer or next bucket, I would say there's the crypto economic layer. So meaning on-chain accounting of these contributions, programmatic rewards. So, distribution of the rewards, and then fees from the real usage flowing back to contributors as well. And then I guess the third one would be coordination and governance. So the one thing I like is you saw when like AWS went down, there's no distributed network with a single operator. So the rules are pretty much encoded in the protocol and the governance. And also the governance steers everything from fees, upgrades, and instead of having like a corporate board for the company.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Alex and Scott. I think that just to boil it down, I think what it does is it uniquely allows for distributed ownership of key utility networks, key infrastructure that's available for public use and consumption. And the only way to actually allow for distributed ownership is via the smart contract, kind of framework and ledgering that blockchain provides. Otherwise, there's no way you could coordinate so many different unique participants and then do the accounting and settlement for all of the transactions that are happening on that network, including the incentives, the utility of that network. And the kind of incredible thing about the tokens there are that they're doing so many different things at the same time. They are serving as an incentive, an asset of value, a transmission of value that is not only incentivizing growth and contribution to the network, but it's also used for spending utilizing network resources. It is the necessary currency for utilizing the network to do what it's designed to do, like transfer data, consume energy, what have you. So I think I enjoy DePIN because it is highlighting the unique kind of economic evolution of deploying infrastructure. And I think that model opens up a lot of opportunities that just are not available to centralized ownership and centralized deployment of infrastructure.
So Sarah, and everybody here, as I'm hearing you describe this, in the back of my head, I'm thinking that I'm sensing like, is there a tension between DePIN and some of the big, lack of a better word, monopolies, the big electricity players, the big, different industrial players? Could be telecom, could be energy, could be solar. Is there a tension being created because is this kind of cutting into their turf, kind of cutting into, their profit centers? That's a sense I'm getting, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, so interestingly, what it is not so much attention as a collaboration. For example, we are now serving two of the three major American MNOs, major carriers, T-Mobile and AT&T, and facilitating the data offload for their own customers where the Helium network exists. And so we have agreements with them that facilitate that offload and allow for it which in turn enhances their own ability to serve their customers. And so we position ourselves as a partner to those carriers, not necessarily competitor. What's interesting there is, as a partner, you obviously are gaining more and more insight into that industry, and the future is opaque in terms of where that path may lead. There are a lot of different areas, but what we have found is that it's far more effective. We are far more effective as a solution for our customers, as a participant, as a collaborator with the carriers and partner with the carriers, rather than an antagonist. But that may not be the same for others.
Well, I was just going to say, Sarah, thanks for that. Alex, I was going to say, you and Scott, any thoughts there?
I think that so much of the pattern of what we're seeing in DePIN echoes what we've seen in the traditional financial sector. And I'm sure you can find some banks that continue to this day to look at crypto as something competitive that they don't want to touch. But for the most part, over the last 10 years, and I was one of the people working with banks, 7 years ago to talk to them about crypto, and get them familiar with it. For the most part, it was just something they didn't understand. But now, as we see, stable coins really proving out the type of use case that a bank can wrap their head around, low fee, instant settlement transactions across the world, great. These banks see an opportunity to become a service provider to everyday customers with those services. And I think, Helium is because they've been at this for a long time, farther along in that journey of kind of like exploring that with the incumbents in their industry. We're in a pilot with an automaker right now, and it's going to take a long time to get the rest of them to come aboard. But I think for anyone in these industries, it's less about competitiveness and more about skepticism. And then once you can prove out value, they figure out how to bring that technology to their customers.
So Sarah mentioned collaboration. Alex, do you have the same feeling with the automakers? Is there going to be a collaborative effort, or are they kind of standing on the sidelines looking at what you're doing? Or
collaboration takes time. I mean, we certainly have great dialogue, and like I mentioned, there are some that we're doing some testing with, as well as not just automakers, but other entities in the auto space. So it always comes down to collaboration. Here's how this technology can benefit all the parties involved.
Yeah, and real quick, I love what you said too, Alex and Sarah. I'm going to piggyback off what you were saying. I think it's all about just when I approach enterprises on behalf of our clients, it's about on the DePIN side, it's about fortifying what they already have, right? Like, yeah, I want to go, yeah, DePIN's going to take over what you're doing, but you can't really say that up front. And this is why I love Sarah's approach, where she's partnering, learning, and then where that ends up, we don't know yet. But I think a lot of these enterprises, you don't want to go in there and go, yo, we're taking over or trying to change what you're doing. You have these services in different sectors that you can offer these big enterprises to fortify what they're already doing by making that network, better by collaborating with them with the data or whatever the collaboration is.
Thanks for that, Scott. So I just want to talk a minute about why DePIN. I think the audience would love to hear, are there barriers to entry? Are there low barriers? Are there high barriers? Why someone on the sidelines looking at this industry, if they're looking for yield, looking for profit, why DePIN?
Jim, I really, I know we talked about this, and a lot of time we always talk about the user side, but I've had an in-depth convo with Alex about this privately, and I love the CapEx model flip, right? Like, because I know there's a lot of enterprises, listening, where traditional infrastructure, you have massive upfront CapEx, you got long paybacks. You guys said it earlier, gate kept by a few corporations and with the governments in there. Whereas opposed to DePINs, you got these thousands and thousands of micro operators running these nodes with their own capital, the own hardware they're deploying. So the build out is so much faster. It's so much more granular. And then it's natively global through the network itself. And then you reward exactly where the demand shows up. So coverage gaps, data blind spots. And I think Demo and Helium have done a really good job with finding regions that are underserved and offering a higher, better reward. And then all of a sudden, boom, now the network and hardware is flowing there. And now there's no coverage gap in those spots. So I really like the CapEx model flip. I know we don't really talk about that too much on panels, but if you're enterprise listening, this is like the main thing I'm really excited about for the companies.
So I
I-
mentioned,
I-
get Sarah.
Sorry to interrupt. What I wanted to
Okay.
add is I think specifically regarding barriers to entry, I think it can be as easy as purchasing the token to participate in the infrastructure. And the reason that that works is that obviously the more attractive the token is, the more valuable the token is, the more incentive there is to contribute and grow the infrastructure. The bigger and more robust the infrastructure, the more useful the network is, the more utility on the infrastructure, the more valuable the token. So there's like kind of a virtuous cycle there. So you can participate as easily as just buying the token and holding it like any other digital asset. If you want to deploy, it depends on the DePIN itself. So for example, for the first iteration of Helium was just plugging in an IoT hotspot. I'm a lawyer. Even I can do that. And I was able to create a signal without too much trouble or complicated and link it to a wallet, and I'm good to go. The mobile access point is a little more challenging. It needs a little bit more technical expertise. It's like setting up your Wi-Fi at home, but it's doable. Then we go up to an outdoor access point that requires even more skill and technology. So it is not, it depends on the device that is contributing to the hardware. The easier it is to deploy, the better, I think. And, but there's going to be a balance there. But the levels of participation range from using the network, contributing to the network, purchasing the token.
So Sarah, just for the record, I am an attorney and I would struggle with plugging in that IoT myself. It's just how it goes.
We
Guys,
have
so
our
let me-
skills and we have our
and our
weaknesses.
fault. Yes. So I think I mentioned to somebody before, I'm in London this week and I had lunch today with a client who's a crypto client. Not related to DePIN at all. It's actually stablecoin related. But anyway, general counsel, he's a pretty sharp guy. We were talking about different things, staking and the miners and validators and blah, blah, blah. And I mentioned, I'm going to moderate a panel today on DePIN. And he actually said to me, what is DePIN? And made me think, like, for the most part, people in this industry, we know who staking is, we know what staking is, we know what miners are, validators, node operators. Why is DePIN not as well known as some of these other concepts within crypto or digital assets?
I think that there is, I mean, to some extent, there's these industries are in themselves so big. If you're somebody who's deep into the payments world, you may not know the ins and outs of what's going on in the automotive industry the way I follow it today, or in telecom, I'm sure the way, Sarah and the Helium team follow it. So there's an element to just how big the world is. But I do think that like there has DePIN projects tend to have, and this is changing too, but they tend to have a little bit of a higher barrier to entry because you're connecting some infrastructure and maybe you're buying some device or maybe you're networking existing infrastructure together. And that's just like different type of skill set and often a different persona who is doing that on their nights and weekends versus the type of person who says, great, I've got a crypto wallet, I have Rainbow, Phantom, MetaMask, whatever. I'm ready to go explore DeFi and kind of understand the inner workings of the financial layer. So, DePIN is still relatively new compared to the almost 20-year history of crypto, which is crazy to say, but we are just in kind of the learning mode of what DePIN is.
And when we look at staking, obviously it's all about yield, right? Are people viewing DePIN the same way? It's all about yield, or is it more about utility? What's your thinking there?
I'll go and say something controversial. I think there's far too many people thinking about ROI and yields in DePIN and not enough people thinking about how we actually grow these things into like reality. And I think that one of the things that any business or network needs is a lot of upfront investment before it's something that is generating, amazing returns and cash flow. And what I hope we can do in the DePIN space is to make our products appealing enough to people who don't care about the ROI or the yield. And once the products themselves are good and better, and I say this because I believe that DePIN is not just a way to earn some yield, but also a way to actually give people better products. And if we can do that, then the money will follow.
Win-win, yeah.
I 100% agree with Alex. I think that unfortunately the crypto narrative has been really focused, almost, myopically so, on the financial aspects, DeFi being a very loud voice in the industry, and it's kind of sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room, especially when you see some catastrophic failures like we did a couple of years ago with FTX and some other ne'er-do-wells in the space. But Alex is right, and it's what I was saying earlier about this being an evolution of how you deploy infrastructure. DePIN opens up opportunities that never existed before. And so Alex is able to offer a service that you couldn't even fathom could exist before this technology did. And so he's utilizing the technology in a way to provide a product that couldn't have existed earlier through DePIN. And that is what's really exciting and interesting about it. It is not about speculating on a token. It's about real world utility that utilizes crypto and blockchain technology to provide excellent, cutting edge, innovative services.
Got any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I mean, really like I'll take one of our clients, Wingbits, right? So they contribute, or users will contribute to the maps using a crowd built radar network for airplanes and drones. And instead of relying on the airport, the news center, anybody with these corporate tracking systems, Wingbits actually lets you place a small device in their home. Business picks up on those aviation signals, and the network itself will stitch all those signals together, making a real-time air traffic map. So for me, that use flight radar, anybody from the aviation industry, this is super interesting and super needed. And we hadn't even talked about, like what Sarah and Alex talked about the reward. And I couldn't agree with Sarah more. And you'll hear a little frustration in my voice with this part. The Web3 side gets real tricky because, like what Sarah said, InfoFi right now, right? InfoFi just sucked all the mind share out because it's predictive, aka gambling markets. When the DePIN's actually doing real world applications from aviation, mobility, telecom, all the biggest sectors. And yeah, I just feel like sometimes the rewards crowd lets that override the yellow brick road where we want all of this infrastructure to go.
Okay. I want to just pivot for a second. Sarah, you said something before that I thought was really interesting. I don't fully understand it, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. I think you said the greater usage or deployment of the token is better for the industry, for the DePIN that's involved. Why is that? Just how does that work?
It's incentivizing the build out. So you have the DePIN is built by individual contributors. So it's people putting the device in their car that's going to collect the data. It's people contributing compute power or solar panels or the grid additions that I think Scott's company is working on. It's people putting up hotspots to create wireless signals that can transmit data for users. They do that because they're able to earn and benefit as owners of that infrastructure. And they earn and benefit through the token. So therefore, the more valuable the token is, the better incentive you have to contribute. The more contributions that you have, the better the network is. The bigger it is, the better it is. And as it starts to scale up, it becomes a more attractive partner to existing players in the industry, and it becomes potentially more disruptive.
So I had read something, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, if you agree with this. One of the benefits of DePIN, distributing infrastructure across many participants, kind of what you're saying, Sarah, makes it less vulnerable to single points of failure. Does that make sense? Is that spot on? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Scott talked about this earlier with the AWS example. As I was saying earlier, I think no individual, so Helium does not own any of the access points, any of the radios, any of the devices that power either of the IoT network or the mobile network. That's all individuals. And so if I unplug my access point, that does not impact the network in a material way as a whole. I could plug it back in, but they're like the resiliency that you get from decentralized ownership, I think, is a really attractive and appealing factor for thinking about DePIN deployments.
So kind of the sense I'm getting is that there is somewhat low barriers to entry in this industry, DePIN, right? Not big CapEx expenditures. At least that's what I think I'm hearing. If that's the case, like, why is that more of a rush of more people getting into the space? Like, is it regulatory concerns? Is it other concerns they have, or risks? Like I would think low barriers to entry, people would be flooding this space, and I'm not getting that sense. I'm not hearing that. So, what's the rub? What's happening?
I think it's what is always happening, which is that new technology takes time and incumbents move slow. And if incumbents, like, when in history have incumbent companies ever rushed into new technology? They don't do that. And so, you have today probably hundreds of startups building in this space that are looking to prove out the value of the technology. We're the ones working out all the kinks, in order to make it really enterprise ready. And like that's just kind of the natural arc of these types of, or really any type of technology.
Appreciate that. So, yeah,
I think there was also a really significant regulatory barrier. Unfortunately, I think the prior iteration of the SEC under Chair Gensler had an incredibly unfortunate chilling effect on, not only projects' willingness to launch during that time, but also counterparties' willingness to engage with them for fear of being targeted as, a participant in an unregistered securities offering.
right.
And that was the uncertainty there had a real measurable detrimental impact on the growth in that space. I don't think the answer is complete permissiveness, but I do appreciate the current chair's, Paul Atkins' willingness to apparently in good faith engage with the industry, have meaningful conversations about how we can do this. And there was actually a no action letter issued by the SEC a couple of weeks ago, the first one regarding DePIN. It was for a project called 00.
And
So, Sarah,
Jim, oh, sorry,
yeah,
Jim, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, like I know a lot of us from the DePIN industry, we were pushing SB 265 on the state level, which ended up getting passed and basically churning or amending some of these older bills that were written in 2017, 2018, basically saying that these are infrastructure investments, not securities. And I think that really set the pace for what Sarah just brought up with the 00. And now we don't have to go state to state, but shout out to Montana, Utah, and a few other states who saw the vision. Jim, the problem was literally when some of us were testifying in Montana, I don't mean to beat you up, I'm just going to use you guys for an example. When we testified, this is an agricultural state, literally bringing up agriculture examples, farm scent, they still voted all no. So like what Sarah said, some people, just because they were on one side of the aisle, were just totally against DePIN, period. Just because of they thought it was coming from one side of the aisle, when there's no side of the aisle for DePIN. DePIN is for everybody. DePIN is for every state. DePIN is for every country. And it was really sad to see that, some of the leaders in some of these states were just standing down because of politics, unfortunately.
Well, but Scott, it's a great point. We have a question from one of the audience, but I want to get to that, Scott, you just mentioned. Why would someone say no to DePIN? Like, well, what is the motivation? What's the concern? What's the risk? Why would they say no?
I agree with Alex. It's the incumbents and the enterprises. I would say, Alex can probably speak on it more because he's been working on DEMO for 4.5 years. But even for like last year, trying to talk to some of these enterprises about DePIN, they're like, "Yo, Scott, we love you, but carry on. We'll get to this some other time." Now you got like Wingbits, teaming up with Korean Air. You got what Sarah mentioned earlier. They're partnered with T-Mobile, with AT&T. Alex, is working on a very big pilot himself. So you're finally starting to see these big guys. You know how these boardroom work. One boardroom goes, and the rest of that sector is like, okay, I don't want to be left behind. And I think that's where we're at now, which is very exciting to see. And I also think a lot of this regulatory clarity that Sarah had brought up is also helping, start to open these gates for these enterprises to want to partner with these different sectors of DePIN.
All right. I'm still not hearing a clear consensus reason why they're against it, but maybe it's a Montana thing. We'll let it go.
No,
Sarah.
I can. So I think, unfortunately, there was a very strong association between anything crypto and being kind of an AML violation, terrorist financing, black market, this kind of parade of horribles trotted out by Elizabeth Warren, who was, look, I mean, like, I don't need to tell my affiliations, but like, I don't like Elizabeth Warren very much because I think she's unnecessarily alarmist. No offense to Massachusetts. And there are other Democrats who are very pro crypto now and who understand that taking the just, kind of rote position that anything crypto is bad because it potentially facilitates money laundering is just an incredibly ignorant position to be taking. But I think she was unfortunately, but effectively able to paint the entire industry with that brush, and DePIN got tainted as well. And so we've had to do a lot of reputational repair after FTX, after certain other instances, to not only say, look, crypto actually offers a ton of AML controls that don't exist for fiat. Fiat is still like, 100 times more likely to be laundered than crypto. DePIN is not about financial machinations or even derivative of financial utility. It's about real world utility. And just because you value that, the measurement of value as a cryptocurrency does not make it a method of terrorist financing or money laundering or other kind of wrongdoing by the participants.
Just so you know, Sarah, you do not walk alone with some of your sentiments. So you're in good company. All right, we have a question here from Anya von Rosenthal, who is on our board, the BBA. Great lady. Great question. And I think, Sarah, we talked about this briefly the other day. She says, could you talk about liability as well? How is network organized to mitigate liability risks? And I remember, Sarah, I think you mentioned something about assigning liability is very important, or determining liability, I should say. So
So one thing that's really amazing about blockchain and smart contracts and the various layer ones that we operate on is that you can program in minimum requirements, and those are automatic checks. So for example, you cannot participate in the Helium network unless you have a compatible access device, and that can be checked electronically over the network. It has to be in kind of geospatially located in the correct location. That's also something that can be done automatically through the Solana smart contract that checks where it is based on triangulation of various other factors. The transmission of data is also measured through the blockchain, through smart contracts. That data has to be valid, real data. It can't be fake data. And all of that is done through very clever, very intelligent people programming smart contracts to ensure minimum standards are met by every participant, every contributor to the DePIN. And that goes a long way towards ensuring that it's going to work where it needs to be working at any given time. When an access point, I can only speak for Helium, but I'm positive that Alex and Scott have similar controls. When an access point does not work, it is excluded from the network, it does not get rewarded, and it does not infect the rest of the network.
Not a great analogy, but let me go here with this. So in staking, if there's bad behavior or someone does double signing, some other things that shouldn't be done, there's a slashing penalty. Is there anything akin to that in DePIN? In other words, let's say you have the hazards of someone that's self-dealing. The user is both a provider and a client. What protections do you have in place, or what remedies do you have in place in DePIN if there's bad behavior? And if bad behavior exists, maybe everyone's saints. I don't know.
I would say that the most common bad behavior that we see in the DePIN space are people who are trying to game the system in order
Right.
to achieve rewards.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you think back, I think the most like prominent version of this that really made waves was back in the days of STEPN, when like, STEPN would reward you, and it wasn't, I don't know, STEPN was not really a DePIN, but it would reward you based on how much you walked. And then you ended up having these people who had like 500 cheap phones and like put them on like a little like machine that bounced them up and down, and like you could farm these rewards. And so like we've seen issues of gaming at Demo, and we know Helium has done a lot of work over the years to root out those gamers. So that's probably the most like tangible kind of bad actor in the DePIN space. But I wanted to go back to that question. I think one of the interesting things, and I think this is, there might be corollaries in the telco space or other areas, but like one of the things that is really interesting for me, at least in the automotive industry, is that the particular area we're playing in is actually still quite a little bit of a legal gray area. And like if you ask who owns the vehicle data, that's not an easy question to answer, and it's not something that the privacy or legal experts in the automotive industry have a good answer for. And so it's kind of, this also happened in the crypto space, in the financial side of it, years ago, where it's like, okay, now all of a sudden the technology is ahead of where the law can be clear or the rules and regulations are clear. And there's this, very retroactive process of like, how are we going to clarify things so that we can, better fit, the new rules and things that we need for this day and age.
So you mentioned who owns the data. So is that just specific to auto, or could that be related to
I'm
Helium's
sure it's
industry? Yeah.
I'm sure it's very, it's very similar to almost any industry where you're talking about an individual's data. You could apply it into the healthcare space too. Like, okay, a hospital conducts a test on me. Like, there's some element of that that's my result. What did the test show? But there's some element of that that's the hospitals. How did the machine perform? And what's going, what exactly do they need to know about the operations of the machine? And that's basically the kind of conundrum in the auto space. It's like there's some element of my usage of the car that's at play here in the data, and there's some element of how is the machine performing that the automakers claim to have a stake on.
Scott, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, no, I think Sarah and Alex pretty much answered that one.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so about 15 minutes left, just to roughly. One area I wanted to go into. Well, quick question here. What's your advice for someone new who wants to learn about DePIN and get involved? Have lots of money? What's the advice?
Let me tell you our address.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fairly broad question, but I think, just doing quick research on what are the big DePIN projects, which ones are, and what stage they're in, is a great way to start. I mean, obviously a pitch for Helium is like, look at, we one of the great things about DePINs all over, I think, is the ability to be as really, really transparent about the utility of the network and the number of participants and all of the stats that go into it. And we try to make as much of that public as possible. So if you go to Helium World, you can see every access point. You can see how much data goes through all of those access points. You can see who is using those access points. Is it, which carrier is it, and which carrier is that access point serving? So you're able to kind of judge for yourself the merits of like, what is this network? Is it doing what it's saying? You can always check the real data, which, by virtue of blockchain is publicly available. In terms of participating, I mean, like if you're, technologically savvy, please, install a hotspot or convert your existing hotspot to be compatible with our network and start doing the research and seeing how it works. The best way to understand this is to start doing it, really. I mean, not until you're kind of participating as a user, as a deployer, are you really going to get it, I think.
So I like to follow up on that because Karen's a great question, Karen Knox. So in order to be involved in DePIN, do I have to say in demo situation, I have their device in my car, or Sarah, I have the hotspot hooked up with Helium. Like, in order to get involved, do I have to do that, or can I just buy a token off an exchange somewhere, or how does that look? Do I have to be
As
a
I said
member of the
before, I think
infrastructure? Yeah.
no, I don't think you have to. I think like it depends on how involved you want to be. But I think when I was talking about barriers to entry, the
Hmm.
easiest way to participate is to buy the token, and you can participate in the ecosystem that way. For you can deploy a device. Some devices are a lot easier to deploy than others, and you can earn tokens that way as well. You can also utilize the network. So you can, if you're an AT&T subscriber, there's a very good chance you've already utilized the Helium network and you haven't even known it. So you're a DePIN participant without even realizing it because your
Wow.
data has gone through the Helium network. It just depends on the level of involvement you want, but I think there's many different tiers where you can be involved, which is another cool thing about it.
Okay. So it sounds like a big challenge is getting the word out.
I think that's probably sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim, I also say too, like start with what you're familiar with. Like, like you're into driving. Why don't you try demo, right? If you or I love what Sarah said. If you're a technological person, start deploying, instantly after you do some research. I think there's a lot of barriers, and the lowest barrier is just some of your time, right? Some of these DPINs are resource. I hate saying resource network, but they're apps, right? Yeah, I could just download the app and start today. So yeah, I think there could be something from you're just, committing some time all the way to, like Sarah said, if you're a really technological person, getting to the nodes and deploying for the network. But I always say start with what you know. Like, you're a farmer, cool, look into agriculture sensors. If you're in telecom, boom, Helium's the perfect start. Mobility, demos right here.
So speaking of that, I have 5 children, three teenage daughters right now driving. I do have tracking devices on their cars.
Hmm.
I may be reaching out for a demo solution as well, which might make sense. So we'll see what happens. Question here from John Hargrave, another member of the BBA. I would love also to know the latest stats on how much you can make running a Helium hotspot. Here we go. It's always about the yield, the profit motive. Are there physical locations that are better because they are currently underserved? I don't know if John.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the way that you earn rewards is based on the amount of data that you're serving. And so generally, more commercial spaces, places with much more footfall, are going to be more lucrative spaces. We have a number of small business customers who, the coffee shop, the pizza place, the gym, they actually have existing hardware that they're able to simply convert through a firmware update to be compatible with our network, and they onboard those devices onto their crypto wallet, and they are now earning tokens based on the utility of those devices. You can also purchase a Helium hotspot and set it up and do it that way. But it's in a lot of different factors inform how much you will earn. But generally, the more people around you, the more data they're using, the more you will earn.
Great, John. I hope that answers your question. If not, we'll follow up with you. I want to get into kind of where we are regulatory wise, and where we're going in the future, because I think, and we kind of alluded to this before, maybe what stifled the industry a bit was not maybe, definitely was the previous administration and their outlook on digital assets, right? You mentioned about the 00 non-action letter. Why was that important? And this is going to be kind of quick, rapid fire questions. We have 10 minutes left, guys. Sarah, we mentioned the 00 no action letter. Why was that important?
Is the very first comment by the SEC regarding DePIN, except for the settlement that they made with my company, where they alleged the hotspots themselves were unregistered securities, which is a preposterous statement and was duly dismissed with prejudice. So 00 sent in a lengthy request for no action, very, very specific to their project. Happily, their request for no action was granted, meaning the SEC is not going, based on the facts presented, is not going to make any allegations that what they are doing involves unregistered securities. Unhappily, that is not going to be great precedent for other DePINs because it is very narrow, right? It is narrow to the facts of 00. However, contemporaneous with the issuance of the no action letter, Hester Pierce, one of the commissioners of the SEC, issued a much broader statement. It's just a statement by one commissioner, but it's great language, and it harkens back to the two statements issued by CorpFin earlier, which about proof of work and proof of stake blockchains. And essentially what she said is distribution of tokens through devices to incentivize deployment of physical infrastructure is not an investment contract and is not therefore subject to the securities laws. So I take it what you will, but it is the first statement by the SEC about DePIN. So that's why that was important.
Okay, but you mentioned something important. I think it was Hester Pierce said that DePIN is not an investment contract, correct?
Right, and that's about as good as the statement it is, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
but it is not nothing, right? It is good dicta.
All right. Well, and head in the right direction.
And
Well, the
Jim, it
clarity.
saves us a lot of time too, because we literally we're going state to state, literally going, okay, if federal doesn't want to, this is about a year ago, uh, Satoshi Fund, Channel Crypto, a bunch of others. Yeah, like it was a long road, but like what Sarah said, now that we have the federal government coming in, we don't have to go to the rest of the 43 states individually and try to lobby and testify on the behalf of DePIN. So it's like a great little checkmate to get us started. And then I would say real quick, because I know you mentioned the Genius Act earlier, Jim. I would say it's definitely a net positive because you get the trusted payment rails for rewarding these contributors and charging the users. And then the enterprise and funds, they feel more comfortable, like we were saying earlier, with settling in stable coins tied to all this DePIN usage as well.
So Scott, that's a great point. Actually, that's where I was going next. A question to the panelists here was going to be, will the Clarity Genius Act help, will it stifle or promote DePIN going forward? I mean, I don't know if we fully know how the Clarity Act is going to end up at the end of the day, but Sarah, any thoughts from you on that?
So for clarity is, I think market structure legislation that specifically explicitly defines DePIN is going to go extremely far in creating a positive environment for growth for DePIN, growth and adoption for DePIN. Just really quickly, Clarity unfortunately does not define DePIN. It does have an exemption for end user distributions, which from staking, mining, or validating. You could go both ways about whether distributions of tokens from DePIN qualify as one of those three things, but it is not explicitly laid out, and I think that's a problem. Senate Banking released a discussion draft called the Responsible Financial Innovation Act. That actually does include a definition of DePIN, which is very exciting, and it exempts DePIN tokens 100% from securities laws. It says those are not investment contracts. There's still some clarity, pardon the pun, that needs to be made there to kind of better to more specifically target the distribution of those tokens, not the tokens themselves. And for those who are familiar with Howey, it's not about the oranges, it's about how the oranges are distributed and sold. And so I think that clarification needs to be made in the Senate banking draft. Now we have Senate Ag, which just this week released their own discussion draft, which puts all the power in the CFTC. That piece of legislation also does not define DePIN. I personally don't think it's particularly helpful because it simply says that all digital assets should be treated as commodities except if they are securities. So it doesn't go very much in helping us evaluate which is which.
So to that point, real quickly, there's a few more questions. We have just a couple of minutes. We have a question from the audience here. Is there lobbying efforts going on in the DePIN industry? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
It's great to hear
So shout
at a
out to the
federal
digital.
level. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to the Digital Chamber. They've been everything from me getting introduced to Michael Saylor to speaking at DC Summit with Helium. Demo was there as well. We're all doing our part, not only at the summit levels, but also testifying literally, from state to state. But now a lot of us are getting flown out to DC to represent our particular sector, whether that's mobility, telecom, aviation. And then that is bringing more people in, like Leidos and a lot of these companies that could benefit from DePIN, which we never had a lot of these government eyes before.
That's awesome. Fantastic. All right, question here. I think it's kind of go to Alex, some comments you made earlier about data, who owns it. Again, question from Anja. Just subscriber to a service, quote unquote, subscriber to a service as someone who participates in DePIN, what do you think of consumer protection laws promoting consumer rights, or do you think it's limiting, in parentheses, financial sector, open banking to get access to data, DeFi activity, blah, blah, blah. Is that being developed? It sounds to me like this is going to be a work in progress with the law and how DePIN starts advancing. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure I fully understand the question here, but I actually have done quite a bit of I think that the open banking legal activity that occurred about 10 years ago is actually a great example and a great case study in why I think open source software is better. So I think it was 2013, it might have been 2015, that the EU actually passed into law and said, as a financial institution, you need to have these open banking laws, and specifically, these fintech providers that are going to build on these APIs need to be able to, send money on the user's behalf and need to be able to access like account level data. And so the EU passed this, and within 5 years, there were hundreds and hundreds and then thousands and thousands of fintech startups. And like basically all of the crazy fintech stuff that we use today came out of that legislation, where, that's what enabled buy now, pay later. That's what enabled, electronic, or like it didn't really enable it, but like streamline the process for electronic, apps with stock trading, or even the fact that, crypto apps can let you link your bank account. Like Plaid was, from that era. So what happened to the incumbents of the time? Well, some of the incumbents said, okay, cool, this is the law now. We're going to lean into it and we're going to make great APIs and we're going to try to attract developers and fintechs to work with us. And some of the incumbents at the time said, why would we give up? We're going to make this hard. We're going to fight this. And we don't want this. Like, this is encroaching on our turf. And what do you think happened? The incumbents that leaned into it and adopted the new technology and supported the startups did phenomenally well. And many of those, companies now have thriving, like, banking as a service platforms. And on the other side, the incumbents that fought it did really poorly. And so that is happening in the data space, is particularly around automotive. It is starting to happen. And I think it's a model that you could apply in some way, shape, or form to virtually every other industry.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you very much, Alex. Anja, hope that answered the question. If not, we can circle back. We have 3 minutes left, 3 panelists. You have 1 minute each. Guys, you have a crystal ball in front of you. In the next 3 years to 5 years, where do you see DePIN? Has it scaled massively compared to where it is now? Do we have much more industries and infrastructure being utilized for DePIN? Do you see broader adoption, mass adoption? 1 minute each. Go around the dial, please.
Hopefully, yeah, I do. I think that clarity through legislative clarity will help. It can only help the industry grow better, faster, more reliably. I think DePIN is learning a lot based on past mistakes about, the gaming that Alex was talking about that we've all experienced. What works in terms of governing the network, how the economics should work. Kind of, there's been a lot of tweaking over the last 5 years. I think that in a more permissive space from a regulatory perspective, better knowledge by other participants in the industry, we're going to be able to capitalize on the prior, knowledge that we have and, mistakes that we made in the past and turn that into a much more robust framework for moving forward.
Thanks, sir. Thank you. Alex.
Yeah,
I am
think,
very
oh, my bad, Alex.
sorry. I'm very excited about the overlap with stablecoins. And I think that one of the things that has held DePIN back is the lack, and frankly, I think it's held DeFi and the crypto financial sector back, is the lack of interconnectivity of these two pieces. And they've sort of been building in parallel. And I think, within a few years, we're going to start to be able to do things like integrate stablecoins for card payments, or maybe you're paying your phone bill in stablecoins or whatever. And I think as we actually find the overlap between DeFi and DePIN, that's going to lead to an explosion of a whole lot more economic activity and value.
Totally agree with you on the increased use of stablecoins. Totally agree. Scott, last words?
Yeah, that's why I love calling DePIN now real world applications, because of what Alex just said. The DeFi layering gets really exciting. Yeah, 3 years, I think DePIN stops being this niche new crypto category. It's not really new anymore. And it becomes this invisible back end for, robotics is real big right now, real world automation, AI. I think the networks also that will win will be the ones that provide the actual useful work. And we're seeing, we're about a year behind RWAs, but you're seeing now the demos, the heliums, the wingbits, the rise to the top, and some of these fake, I don't want to call them fake DePINs, but we'll say hardware with meme coins attached to them, they're starting to fall off, right? And this is good and healthy for the space. I think also you'll see a lot of more of these Fortune 500s that we were speaking on earlier integrate certain DePIN rails, because obviously they're cheaper, they're faster. We said it earlier, they're more resilient, and then traditional cloud or and Sarah's, where she's at with telecom. And then the last thing, the regulatory clarity, I think will just get better and better. I know it's not perfect right now. Sarah brought up a lot of great points where DePIN wasn't mentioned in a few of them, but I think the more the time that passes, the more people that understand this technology, more people outside of Web3 will want to lobby and represent the cause instead of just us.
Totally agree with you, Scott. The more people that learn about it, the better for everybody. Scott, Sarah, Alex, very educational, informative, edifying. This was phenomenal. Fantastic, guys. Great job. I'm sure the audience, I'm getting feedback already from people. The audience loved this discussion. So we got to do more. Get the word out. Keep it going.
Thank you.
Thanks,
For
Jim.
sure.
Everybody. Take care, everybody. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.